Okay, I finally got everything off for the shield to show you guys that if you don't have a pristine car, these bolts are going to snap off. But that's not a huge issue because you don't need these bolts after you replace the turbo. You don't really need them at all. You just get rid of the shield and put on a blanket because it works much better. That's what I'm going to be doing. But there are a few that you need to get to. There is one here, one over on the side. If you look back here, there's a bracket. There's two that go there. There's one here and one further down there. And then the hard ones to get, there's two down here. Pretty much anywhere on here where you see a screw, you gotta take it off. So all the ones around there, and then once you finally get them off, break them or actually unscrew them, then you just have to wiggle this off and do something with it. I don't know. Son of a... Oh, there we go. So if you want a better look, got two holes there, those two down there, there's your bracket, and yep, that is your turbo shield that we will not be using anymore. Yes, I had to take the bottom off because I dropped a 10 mil and it got stuck. Damn it. With that heat shield out of the way, we can finally get this downpipe off. So to get the downpipe off that's connected to the hot side of the turbo, there are 5 bolts that we need to take off. You can see 2 up here, and then move around over to the side. There's another one that sticks out over here. And if you look over, there is one down here, and the other one you can really see at the bottom of the car. Now for replacing the turbo, once we have all the exhaust components out of the way, our intercooler out of the way, then we can get to the exhaust. Now the exhaust, what we're gonna have to do is take out the bolts here on the side. You can see the bolts over here, keeping it in place. And the reason why we have to take off the exhaust or disconnect the downpipe, whichever you do, I'm replacing mine, so the whole thing has got to come off anyway. There's actually a bolt underneath here that can only be accessed once you take the downpipe off. So there's another bolt down there. There should be 3 keeping the turbo in place, and you should have 2 on this side and then 1 over there. If you have the gasket, then you know what it looks like. It's kind of a Y. There's 2 here and then it tapers off to another one. And yeah, you need new gaskets, especially this one. This thing was falling apart when I was taking it off. It doesn't even sound healthy. So the 2 bolts here and here, those are pretty easy. You can use a short socket and get over those. But this one right here for the bracket, it's not actually attached to the turbo, it's its own little bracket. That one you're gonna need a long one, longer 14 than the other ones, because this actually has thread sticking up way further than these 2. So grab that. Once you get all 3 of those out, then you need to find a good area to get under the turbo to get that last bolt. Alright, so here we are looking up at where the turbo goes to the downpipe. If we look up here, let's try to get this right there. That's the bolt that you're trying to get to. So it's basically impossible to get to once a downpipe is actually attached, but once we have it out, we can go in and we can take that off. So what I did is I just got my wrench, my socket with my breaker bar, popped it down here right on the threads and popped it loose. Now all the bolts holding this in place are completely off. So the only thing keeping the turbo in place now is, if we look right in here, you've got this in the way, so you need to get that alligator clip out of the way. But the main thing is you've got all of your oil lines and coolant lines and stuff that are still attached to the turbo. So you're gonna have to take these off. You can either take them off here or up here, depending on if you have new lines or you don't. I'm not replacing the line, so I need to keep these and transfer them to the new turbo. So I'm gonna take them off, and I really don't want to drain all of the oil and all the coolant. So as soon as I take them off, I'm gonna plug them, either with a bolt or a rag, or hang them up or something. And once I do that, then I can continue on, because right below this is the up pipe, and I am replacing the up pipe. So not gonna be a super quick one, but I am gonna do a temporary block on these. So I'm starting off the line here, and what you guys can see is I took the bracket off for this just so I have more room, since this is a whole hard line, to get to these two down here, because you have to pull them separate ways with wrenches. To get to this, I just removed the two bolts on here that were screwed in right here and right here, just to make it a little bit easier. You kind of have to wiggle it out a little bit, but this thing turns, so it gives you a little bit more room to work with the line. Okay guys, for this hard line, those two, you've got this little nut at the top, little acorn looking one, and then there's one right below it. Probably won't be able to see it on the camera, but there's one directly below it. And if you guys want to get this off, they're both 17 millimeters, and the one on top is actually the one that moves. So I just cracked this one loose, so you can see that's turning. So if you're ever confused and you're like, I don't know which one it threads into what, the top one is the one that's threaded. So now that I have that out, I already got the banjo bolt out of here. Make sure you grab the copper washers that go both on the top and on the bottom, and make sure you replace them if you are swapping this out. Make sure you have new ones. Okay, finally got the turbo out, and what I did exactly was I removed the hose from here, took that off. I actually left both of these intact because it's kind of a pain in the butt. So instead what I did is, as you guys saw, I removed the line that goes here, and then over on this side, this is where that bottom one comes through. So the line goes underneath, comes around, and attaches to this bottom one. So this one's fine, I can keep that on there and take the turbo out, but that bottom one loops around to the hose that goes right over here. I have it off to the side. It's this hose right down here. It's not the one up here that is shiny, but is the one right down there. And if you look right down there, there is a place to put the hose. And that's the one that comes straight out here. Like, I didn't even know it was there, but these things are just, they're so light on there, it just pulled out when I picked it up. So that's gonna be kind of a pain when putting in the new turbo, or if you're just putting this back in, making sure that this actually fits on there. So now that the turbo is out, there's a few things that you need to swap over. As you can see, some things are missing. That's because I put them on the new turbo, such as these two lines here for coolant. These two lines do need to be modified a little bit, at least for me. It may not be for you, depending on which turbo, but for mine were further apart, so I had to snap it in the middle, which was actually really easy. You just bend it back and forth like, you know, you would any sort of metal. Bend it enough times it snaps, and then pop those in there the same orientation they were before. They're just a little bit more separated out. And then you also need to take the line, which is right here. I cleaned it up a little bit, cleaned the surface here. That gasket was really on there. It was like super glue. It did not want to come off, but got it off, cleaned the surface, cleaned the inside of this hose. The hose isn't cracked or anything, so I'm going to reuse the hose. And when it comes to the clips here, these are put on because they're so easy to actually put on, because it's in such a hard location. If these things aren't tight enough and they just barely stay on there, all you have to do is take the little finger clips here and bend them the other way. So I can't really do this, but bend them out, separate them, so the hole here becomes smaller. You just bend it like that a few times until it goes around the hose nice and tight instead of how loose it was before. So that's what I have to do. I have to stretch these the other way so they become tighter. then I can put the new gasket, which came with my turbo. So new gasket, pop it on there, install that, and that's pretty much the last thing I need to do besides the gaskets, because I'm replacing the gaskets that go on the downpipe and the uppipe. So pop those on, and then I will pretty much be done with this part. Alright, I have ran into another problem. This pipe right here, like I was just saying, if you put it on here, the holes do not align up. I've got the left one perfectly lined up, and the right one, as you can see, is quite a bit off. Yay! So, looks like what I'm gonna do is drill the holes out just a little bit, just so I can get that screwed on. These aren't threaded, so it shouldn't be a problem if I just drill these out enough to where I can get them both to get in there. Should be totally fine. Alright, so my modification was just to drill the holes out, and that's what I did. Nothing too major, just drilled them out until I lined it up, popped it on here until I could get both screws in. That is good enough. Just make sure if you do drill it, the bottom part, you're gonna have to file it down because of the drilling. So file it down if you do have anything and make sure it's nice and smooth. Now, in order to get to the up pipe, which is right here, you're gonna have to obviously take off the turbo, which is above it, and then the downpipe to get the turbo off, and the intercooler to get the room up here. Anyway, once you actually get to this point, you need to make sure all these bolts are off for when it drops down. I'm not totally sure about this mounting bracket right here. You might have to take that off to get it off, unless you can drop it down enough, which I think we'll be able to. But another has snapped off because rust and seizing is terrible. I love sirens. So here we are back under the front of the car. There's your oil filter for reference, but if you look over here, you're gonna have this big old heat shield, and you can see how rusty those are. This heat shield needs to come off, and those bolts, I'm sure, are just going to snap and give me a whole bunch of problems. But that's the first step for your up pipe, is to get this heat shield off so we can really get under there. So before the heat shield comes completely off, you'll notice right up here you have your Upstream O2 sensor, or air fuel, or whatever you want to call it. So we're gonna have to come up to the engine bay and unplug it. Now, that O2 sensor is this conveniently blue wire here, so we just have to unplug that so the whole thing can drop out and you don't have to use a O2 sensor wrench down there to get it out, which is quite a lot harder. And if you want access, I'm over here on the right-hand side of the car. There is a little panel, and you can see it right in there. It's a little access panel that I have off. There's 3 little clips that go to it, and right now I just have it just hanging on by one, so I don't have to take it off. But if you move that up out of the way, you can get in there and get to the O2 sensor if you want to put the socket on. And if you want to just unplug it, there's 2 little clips that hold on to it. You're gonna have to either figure out how to get them off or cut the little clips. So there we go, finally got the heat shield off. I had to break the bolts, I had to bend it and destroy it to get it out of the way. Hardest part was getting it off of the O2 sensor. Now I have the O2 sensor wrench that's specifically made for them, but of course it's seized in there and the whole thing got shredded, so that's rounded off. So I took that whole thing off, it's unplugged, sitting down here, took off the 2 clips that were holding it in right above it, and now we're at this point. This is where your up pipe goes up to. I've got some WD-40 on the bolt here, and of course on the other side. I'm gonna let that sit. Hopefully that will help me out when I break these apart so I can finally get the up pipe out. Okay, bolts are out. The up pipe, as you can see, dropped down a little bit. So now, comes the fun part of taking it out, finagling it around from up here, and trying to get it to come out without any issues. Of course, almost forgot, the brackets that are up here are in the way, so I need to take off the bracket here, which is just being held on by that, and this one right here being held on by the bolt down there. Once I get those out, then the up pipe can come up. And once you have those off, the bracket I already took off over here should come off. This one, I forgot, I did not see that there is actually another bolt hiding right here. There's another one just kind of chilling out down there, being a douche. Alright, and the last thing you need to do before that up pipe comes out is to get the wire. So you're gonna trace it, it's gonna come along here, and it's gonna be the third one down. I have it removed already so you guys can see it, just a little tab in the back. But you push down the tab, it pops out, looks like this. Then you can push it through, all the way through here, take this clip off like that. It's just little alligator things. It goes on like that and you just push it up, no locks. Feed it through and then you can take it off and reuse it if you need to for your up pipe. And just like that, we are free. We've got everything out of the way. Up pipe is now gone and I didn't even need to unbolt or do anything with the manifold down below. So now I can get my new one and pop it in here. And here is my new up pipe. This is the Invidia up pipe. I do have the one with the little bung here, so you know I can try to keep it as stock, at least with sensors, as possible. And it comes with 5 of these studs to go in each one of the 5 holes so it can connect down there. And you've got a short end and a long end. A short end is going to be the one that threads into here. And I have all the other ones done already. It's going to stop once it hits the middle. And then what you want to do is take 2 washers. I just grabbed 2 from all the stuff that I pulled apart. You're going to put one on top of the other, and then you're going to tighten the top one so this whole thread will then lock into place. You just need to tighten it up a little bit on each one of these so these don't move around when you're actually threading it down there. Alright, got those studs in, and I just placed it down here. This is going to be the general way that it looks. You're going to have the 2 studs still facing up this way, and if you do have the bung, it's going to be on the left side, kind of over here. So I have it set down just like that, and then I'm going to go down below, and I'm going to put in the screws so this thing can be attached. And if you don't want to deal with this crap in the future, get some anti-seize, because it's going to help. And also, don't forget the new gasket. Clean the surface and pop on that new gasket, because look at that old one. It's nasty. And with the 2 bolts down at the bottom holding this guy in place, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put the sensor back in, thread it into the bung, come up here, and plug it back into its wiring harness. Alright, so I got it in, but the issue was I had to bend it a little bit because it was kind of smashed up against here. The wire still reached, just barely though, but yeah, I did have to bend that a little bit. I don't think it threaded in as much as the stock one either, but it's in there, it's in really, really tight. I don't think there's gonna be any sort of leak coming from it, but still, that was a little annoying. I had to chomp that up a little bit. But hey, if it doesn't work, this up pipe comes with a little bung stop, so I can just thread that in and just get rid of the code. Alright, next up we need the Grim Speed High Performance Sealing Technology Seal of Approval. That goes right there. No, I'm not sponsored by Grim Speed because they denied my sponsorship. Damn it. And once you got your gasket on, you can go ahead and put these 2 brackets back on, which is so much easier than taking them off. Just pop on the nut on both of those, the screws down there, and don't forget your 1 screw down there. Again, so much easier to put this on than take it off. And next up, the new turbo gets to go in. So, the first thing we have to do, and probably the hardest part, is to make sure we get this hose to go in place. So if we look down here, we've got that little opening that it needs to go onto. So we're gonna pop this down where it's supposed to go in place. I don't have it on here, but make sure you have both of your hose clamps on here. Like I said, I stretched these the other way so they're a lot tighter fit now. Throw this one on there, and yeah, try I will. And once you get the turbo in place, you gotta line up the 3 screws, one in the back there, and then the 2 over here. And for me, the bottom part actually wasn't too bad. Once I got it lined up and you go underneath the car, you can see where exactly it lines up. And I don't have the clamp on there right now, but I actually have enough room down there to reach my hand up and put the clamp on. But once that's lined up and you kind of start wiggling it down, the biggest issue is getting this hose onto the front of the turbo. But now that I have everything in place, I can wrap this back around, tighten it up, put the nuts back on to secure this in place, put the hose fitting on there, of course the hose fittings onto both the coolant lines, and yeah, pretty much get this thing all snapped in. Well, I almost got everything back on. Got the coolant line up here, got the vacuum hoses attached to the 2 little pieces up here. But when I went for the oil line up top, looks like this one doesn't exactly fit. So hopefully I can bend this down a little bit. That bottom one that it threads into doesn't really have a whole lot there to bend or move. So I'm hoping I can bend the top up just enough to get it threaded in there and get this thing attached. All right, so that was pretty simple. I got that bent into the right place and tightened on. Really the best thing to do from what I just did is I attached it up here and then bent it the best I could to get it around where it's supposed to be attached to the one down here. And then once you get that, actually unattach that one and then attach the other one while it doesn't have the bolt in, and then just kind of wiggle them around until you get both in at the same time. But something you got to remember, if you did replace the turbo or took the turbo out and put it back in like I did, before you just start up your car all willy-nilly, you have to prime the turbo. You got to get the oil and the antifreeze, all that stuff filled to the right place. So what we have to do is put the keys in the ignition, and before starting, gas pedal down here, just put it to the floor and then crank. It's not gonna start up, it's just gonna crank and crank. That is for clear flood mode. Subaru has that to clear flooding situation if your car is flooded with fuel. So that's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna start it up. Where are my keys? All right, so I'm gonna put my foot to the floor and then start. There we go. Give it a few seconds. I'm gonna cycle this 3 times. All right, now I'm gonna shut everything off. Again, give it a few seconds. And while I'm doing that, I'm gonna head outside and I'm gonna check for any leaks. So now everything is primed. Everything should have some pressure. There's the turbo. Basically just check for any wet, moist, bad things that shouldn't be dripping. Check under the car, make sure we don't have any puddles. I know I do have a little bit of water more up front because I spilled something. Probably can't see it, but looks pretty good for now. Okay, so I have checked everything. The main parts that I'm looking for is the 2 connections for the turbo. That's where your coolant lines are, the new ones that we put in, and of course the one up top That's where we have the oil line. No leaks on there so far. So now I'm gonna start it up, but before I start it up and it starts to get warm, I lost coolant when I did this. So I'm going to take this off and I'm gonna put in my little anti-spill thing, cap funnel guy. I'm gonna put that up here and I'm gonna make sure I am topped off and I burp the system, make sure I get all the air bubbles out and I am topped up on coolant. Hey guys, thanks for sticking around to the end of the video. If you haven't already, make sure you follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram so you can get some behind the scenes stuff that hasn't happened yet and unreleased content that no one else has seen. And if you haven't already, watch that video. And if you watched that video, watch that video. And if you've watched both of those videos already, make sure you subscribe down here. Yeah, watch this stuff. It's awesome. And if you've watched that, and subscribed, I love you.